Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tenser, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Salima Valji, CEO and founder of Unleash Forward, a purpose-driven leadership acceleration company that focuses on elevating more women and underrepresented leaders into leadership roles and the boardroom. Like this video if you enjoyed our show, and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Salima Valji, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to saying hi to the future.
So Salima, look, the future that you are working on is a critically important one. It's one where more women and underrepresented leaders are sitting at board tables and at the highest levels of leadership. So how did that passion come to you? Because obviously, look, we know it's a critical issue, but as I've said to a number of other guests, that's great, but why you? What made you say, yeah, no, I have to make a difference?
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's a really good question. I will have to say it was never something that I sought out to do. It was never something I was like, as I was planning my career, this is what I'm going to do. I like to say that this found me. And when I first started doing leadership development and when I was doing coaching, I found that there were a lot of women of color who were approaching me, asking for guidance, asking for help. And so that was one key signal of like, oh, maybe I should go lean in further into this. The other piece comes from my own working experience. So if you're listening to this, you may not know, but I'm a woman of color myself. And so having gone through, when I first moved to Canada, we moved into a small town. We were the only people of color within 20 miles. And so the treatment, the racism that we were like, I never had friends growing up. We were beat on the bus all the time. My sister got beat up in the classroom in front of my teachers. They didn't do anything. And so that was what my existence was like for the first 10 years of my life. And it wasn't until we moved to the city and then I was 10 years old. And on my first day of school, I had these two girls, Renee and Andrea. I still remember their names. And they came up to me and they're like, do you want to play with us? And that was the first time I was actually invited to play. And so that, obviously I grew out of that. I built my confidence, but it was really the first time I started to see myself beyond the color of my skin. And so having that experience as a child was very foundational. And then as an adult, as I got into more senior roles, I started to hear things at the senior tables that I was not comfortable with. And those were statements such as, oh, we can't hire her because she's pregnant. We can't buy the company because she's pregnant. You can't hire her because she has a lisp. We can't hire him because he's not presentable to clients. We can't do this because of this. And so I was constantly hearing these kinds of messages. And I was just like, hearing those messages and then these women coming to me and saying, we need your help to make our voices louder, were the two catalysts, I would say, that kind of propelled me into being an advocate for women and people of color in the workplace today.
Well, when I hear these stories of youth, I'm obviously a Caucasian guy, but a non-visible minority in a sense, because there's a lot of racism towards religion as well over time. But when I hear these things, does it make you stronger over time in some way? And I don't mean that in like, boy, this is a good thing, believe me. That's not, but I'm listening to what you're saying, but you've obviously found a way to bridge that trauma into an unbelievably focused and passionate platform and company. What do we need to learn to take from positive and the negative experiences to break through in our lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. Going through it is hell and it sucks. There needs to be a fortitude, a strength, a community, and support around you in order to build that resilience. So I definitely did not do this on my own. So you really need to have a strong support system around you. Do I think I'm stronger for it? Absolutely. Do I want this for my nieces and nephews? Do I want them to go through it? Definitely not. No. Because you're starting from such a further path behind. I don't know if you've ever seen this exercise, where they ask students, like, take a step forward if you have both your parents. Take your step forward if both your parents, are working. Take a step forward. And you can really see how much further some kids are based on their circumstance and how much further. And so, there's a lot more catching up that you need to do. There's a lot more working that you need to do in order to get to the same level as everybody else.
So are you finding, and we can work through the different stages, but are you finding that youth, it's not easier to be a child today, but Canada today, more than 50 or 60 years ago, is becoming more of a melting pot in a very positive way. And our immigration is welcoming people from so many countries who are hopefully making, a great, or planting a great stake in the ground. So are you seeing a difference in childhood or teenagehood experience today?
I think so. I don't have kids of my own, so I see through the eyes of my nieces and nephews, and I see them in their schools with so much diversity. And so I'm not hearing those kinds of stories. But what I am seeing is more with these new immigrants coming in. So I was a professor at George Brown for 9 years, and 50 to 60% of my students were international students who were here on student visas trying to get into the country. And the way for them to stay in this country would then be to get a job. And or even in their co-op programs was to get a job. But they struggled so hard, because while in Canada and immigration, we say, yes, we're open, come to our country, build a new life. But in terms of corporate Canada, we are not open. Unless we do not value international experience the same way we value Canadian experience. And therefore, these people, they often come from really large organizations. They're coming from organizations like Accenture, Coca-Cola, Samsung. They're coming from brands that have companies, offices all around the world. And yet when they land here, they're still not able to get jobs. And so they're having to take on a lot of surface jobs. They're having to take on a lot of jobs that are not the same level as their education. There's a huge gap. That's where I'm seeing a lot of that disparity. And so now, I don't know if you read, there was an article in the Globe and Mail recently which talked about how 30% of immigrants are leaving Canada.
Yes.
They're leaving Canada because they're not able to build a life for themselves here that's successful, that allows them to practice their profession, that allows them to succeed and build a life here for them. And that to me is very, very alarming, that we should be paying attention to, and that's something that corporate Canada can really make a difference on.
So when you talk about that, I mean, that really starts to get into the sweet spot of what you do today, working with individuals and corporations, and sort of carrying along the continuum. And you're talking about students, and I teach at local colleges, and one is an international business diploma where everybody is from away, if you will. And how do you start to build that confidence in a generation, especially a generation of women of color that may not have, hey, again, I'm a middle-aged white guy. It was not very hard for me to look for, wow, what can I be when I grow up? I can be a CEO. I mean, in 99% of them 50 years ago, I could see them in me or me in them. How do you start to build that that confidence or drive their passion or focus their passion in a way that says, yeah, I'm that person. I'm as bright, I'm as charismatic. I can carry this as far as I want to. How does that happen?
It's so interesting you say that, because I coach a lot of women, and one thing I have learned and observed is that oftentimes women know what they want, but they're afraid to share it. So you're right. As a woman of color or a woman, it's not, we have fear in saying, I want to be the president or I want to be the CEO. How am I going to be viewed? My boss is really competitive. Like, those are all the thoughts that these women have. It's like, I have aspirations to go further, but I'm not able to say it. I'm not able to share it because of how I'm going to be viewed. And I'm not going to get supported. And so that's one of the things that I work on, is something I call the share and declare. And I say, you know what? It's none of our business what other people think of us. Let's not say no to ourselves. Don't say no to yourself. Everyone else is lined up to do that. So you don't line up and do the same thing for you. So I say, you have to start by sharing and declaring. And if you, once you start to share and declare it for yourself first, that this is what I want. That's the step number one. Step number two then is starting to communicate that out. And the more you start to communicate that out, it's going to you're going to learn that the system is going to start to help support you, or you're going to learn that the system is going to stop you. And if you discover that you're in a system that's going to put barriers up against it, then you have to ask, am I in the right system? But it's first starting with yourself to say, what do I really want? What's most important for me, for my family, and for my development? So that's the first step.
So you start to build that, again, that awareness of self and that future. How does that, so that's on the individual level. How do you bridge that to the corporate? And because I know you do a lot of work with corporations around this area and workshops around this area. I mean, my goal as a leader for many years is to have an organization that performs. And the notion, and I certainly 30 years ago, I was definitely an outlier. The notion of performance comes from a man or a woman or color or no color. It never crossed my mind. You either were really good at what you did and you stuck around with me and you hopefully, went up the ladder or got compensated fairly, or you didn't. So to me, it should be natural for an organization to say, like The Voice, like, I don't want to see your color or your gender. I just want to see performance. And why are they putting barriers up to people who could probably perform better?
Yeah, it all comes down to our biases, our unconscious biases. So, for example, research has shown is that you're going to sponsor somebody who looks and sounds like you. So if you're a white male in an executive role, you're naturally going to sponsor another white male. So that is our natural bias. So if we're not retraining our biases, we're not going to step outside of our comfort zone and to be able to look for, like, oh, maybe I should be looking at a woman or a person of color and helping sponsor them and helping amplify their impact that they're having on the organization. But unless we're drawn to that awareness, we don't know that we should be doing that. So it's not necessarily that people are doing it intentionally, but it's often unintentionally. If you look at even your network, research also shows is that your network is very similar to the kind of person that you are. And so if you're somebody who is, a white male, somebody who has a cottage, and that's your, and you're golfing, and that's your network, you're only going to be meeting those people and building relationships with people who have other cottages and then who are also golfing. And so again, so unless you become aware of that, you don't realize that there's a talent pool that you're completely missing out on. And so you're right, it is about performance. But sometimes there's people out there who are very strong performers, but if they're not given the right environment to succeed, they can't be at their best. They can't show up at their best and have the impact on the organizations like others can.
So how do we connect them? Because again, you're talking about individuals, helping them to gain the confidence, sketch their path forward, stand up for themselves, and then you're working with corporations to help break down the barriers to acceptance of these individuals. What are the steps there?
Yeah, so it's very important, that it is you're impacting the system while you're also working with the individuals. Because oftentimes I find organizations are like, yeah, we want to increase the number of women in our leadership roles, and I'm like, great. What are you doing in order for them to be, while you're developing that talent, what are you doing in your environment, in your systems, in your policies, in the way you make decisions? What are you doing to change that so they can be successful? Because I can't tell you how many times I speak to a chief security officer, a chief, whatever, they're at the highest level of the role as a woman. They've broken through the glass ceiling, but they're miserable. They don't feel like they have the authority that they should have in their role. They're getting barriered. They're getting, decisions are being made in an old-fashioned way, and so the system hasn't shifted and changed. So the first thing I always say with the organization is like, have you even done an audit? Are you even aware of how decisions are being made? What are the backroom conversations? Are the right people included? So are you really thinking about, even at the meeting level, who's invited to your meetings? So for example, if you're having a board meeting, is it the same people who are coming to the board, or are you inviting your senior leaders to come in and get that exposure and to be able to join the board meeting? Do they even know and understand what are the conversations that are happening at the board? Are they thinking about how those decisions are being made and who's involved in the decision making? Those are the types of places where I say to organizations to start to take an audit. Or even like with one organization I'm working with is like around pay gaps. So oftentimes we talk about, for the pay gap, women make 70 cents to the dollar or 80 cents to the dollar, but we're talking about a white woman. And over a span of a career, over 40 years, research has shown that that wage gap is around $400,000 to $500,000 over a span of a career. But for a Latin woman and for a Black woman, it's over $1 million. That wage gap is over $1 million. That's insane.
Yeah.
You can't change that unless you actually do the research and look at the data within your organization to say, does this actually exist in our organization? Great. That's the first step, is look at the data. And the next step is like, okay, what are we doing to change this? Where are the gaps? Is it happening at more junior levels? Is this happening at the mid-senior, or is this happening at the senior level? And then once we've made the adjustments, how do we make sure that this doesn't creep up again? How do we make sure that we don't lose sight of this? So it always starts, step one is always in the crawl phase, and we start with what's the data that we have, so that it's a data-informed decisions.
So one, I love the fact that it starts with data, because data is measurable and it doesn't lie to you. But how do you hold actions accountable? And I'll give you a similar-ish situation. Like, I do a lot of work in entrepreneurship, corporate entrepreneurship, and the sponsor, sometimes the CEO, we've got to do this, we've got to involve people, we've got to give them the opportunity to move forward, and Ken, go and run the program for us, go and bring it in. I'm like, but you've got to be there. No, you're running it. I said, well, entrepreneurship is about engaging the next gen. It's about showing up and not just signing the check. And I'm, in your case, that is probably 100-fold. Like, getting somebody to sponsor it and getting them to engage in it or with it. How do you well, one, do you really focus on that, and how do you make them step up?
So one of the programs that I have is called the Art of Sponsorship. So this is an example, is I developed this program because the research shows that most sponsors don't know what a sponsor is, and they show up as a mentor. And then on the flip side, the proteges don't know the difference between a mentor and sponsor and what to ask of a sponsor. And so this is a program that really educates both the sponsor and the protege in terms of, because it's a partnership, and both need to understand what their roles are in order for that to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And both need to know and have the strategies in place to know, so that they can have effective sponsorship, so that they can really amplify the voices of the individuals within the organization. So this program, where you're educating and driving awareness for both the sponsor and the protege, helps create an ecosystem that allows for that new behavior to occur, where they're taught what the new behaviors are and what does success look like and what's the impact. So that's one way of how I do that and how I partner with organizations, so that they're creating shifts in the system.
Okay. And this is all part of what you do at Unleash Forward, I take.
Yes.
And
yes.
I love the name. So tell us about, maybe a little bit more. We've talked about in general quite a bit, which is perfect. But how did you create this into a company called Unleash Forward with such a powerful name and a powerful purpose or mission?
So in my former career, I was in technology, digital marketing. And so I was always spending time around leadership development. I was always reading leadership development books. It was something that I was always interested in. I had no idea that leadership development or coaching was even a career. And so I think it was always in the background. And so when I first started my company as a digital marketer, as a strategist, I was called my company Unleash Digital, because I was looking to unleash the impact of what the digital technology could have. So when I came to moving into this company and what was I going to name it, I was like, I'm doing the same thing. I'm unleashing. I'm helping to uncover. This time, instead of it being technology, I'm unleashing potential. I'm unleashing talent. And so, and I want to unleash it forward. And so that's how the name kind of grew. And it was just one day I saw the name Unleash in really big letters on a magazine cover, and it just spoke to me, and I just put it on my vision board, and that word has just really resonated for me, and that's how the name came about.
Well, I think it's a great name, and I think that what you're doing is certainly it certainly speaks to the name. So that's wonderful. And one of the things that I know you have as part of Unleash Forward is a program for the executive presence of women of color. So what is that program?
Yeah. So I always say that executive presence starts with the conversations we have with ourselves. And so oftentimes people think executive presence is like, am I dressed the right way? Or am I saying the right things? Am I communicating the right way? And I always say it actually, in order for us to shift what's happening externally, we have to shift what's happening internally. So what are the conversations that we're having internally? So executive presence is really about becoming aware and uncovering what are the conversations that we're having, and then starting to shift that, turning the volume down on our negative bias, on the negative voice, and turning the volume up on our positive voice, on the voice that's going to actually have impact for us and carry us forward. So we first work on what's that voice in your head, and we learn to how do we turn the volume down. And then we start to, there's research that was done by Sylvia Ann Hewitt in terms of what is the elements, what's required for executive presence. And so it was appearance, gravitas, and communication. And the research showed that appearance was only 5% of the formula, but it was our gravitas in terms of how we showed up, which was the majority of that formula, the majority of that framework in terms of what impacts our presence. And so that's why I really, and in my own experience, it starts with that internal dialogue. So through the executive presence program is we work on that, and then we start to work on what I call as PI. So this is a framework I uncovered in a book by Harvey J. Coleman. And it was a book that's written in the 80s. But it's such a powerful framework. And I feel like it's a framework that got lost. But when I share this framework, it's like it has really driven incredible ahas and career transformation for my clients. And what Harvey J. Coleman says, that in order for us to grow in our careers, is that we need 3 elements. And that PI framework is performance, image, and exposure. And so why this is so important, particularly for women of color, is that we're taught that, hey, just perform, work hard, you'll get recognized. But the reality is that talent does not equal recognition.
Right.
And if you don't have people around you who have been in the corporate environment, who have had corporate roles, you're not going to know this, and no one's going to share this with you. And so when you're first starting your role, when you're first starting your career, maybe the first 5 years, working hard is super important. And of the PI framework, performance is 90%. But as you start to become more senior, performance starts to shrink down, all the way down to 10%. And our image becomes 30%, and our exposure is 60%. So our image is our brand. What do people think about the work that we're doing? What do people think about working with us? Are people going to come to you when their neck is on the line, when their bonus is on the line? Are you seen as somebody who does really good work, but that you have attitude? Are you seen as somebody who does really good work, but you leave dead bodies in your wake? Are you seen as somebody who gets it done and do whatever it takes to get it done? Like, so what is the brand and the image that you have of the work that you do? And then exposure is, who knows the great work that you're doing? So that's the piece around the self-promotion. How comfortable are you about sharing the work that you do? And it's really interesting because I was just talking to a client, and we were on our last session, and we were talking about her wins through her leadership development journey. And she shared that she got the highest review ever in her career at this technology organization. And I said, what was different for you? What changed? And she goes, I didn't change my performance, but it was learning and uncovering the PI and understanding, building my network around me, leveraging the sponsors around me, and really focusing on my self-promotion. That's what got me the highest rating. I didn't work harder. I just shifted my focus into where I was spending my energy. And so all of those elements together in terms of that, sorry, I'm a bit tongue-tied. It's Friday before the long weekend. So, but all of that work you do together in terms of the conversation you have with yourself, and then working on your PI, and then working with your stakeholders, those are all the elements that we work on together as part of executive presence for women of color.
You know what? I've never heard of PI before, and I'm going to pick up that book. I think it's amazing. And yes, exposure, taking some risks as you go along. I think for any executive or would-be leader, those are really the moments that define you. So, Salima, it's amazing how quickly our time goes here. But as we come to the close of this episode of Say Hi to the Future, one last question. What is the Bold Expedition?
So the Bold Expedition is a program I've designed for those people who are mid to senior level in their career and are looking to reinvent themselves. They've got this whisper in them, this whisper that says, I'm not happy, something's not right. I know I want to make a change, but I don't know where to start. I don't know what conversations have. Should I be doing this? Am I crazy? Can I make the same money? How am I going to do this? So I call it a bold expedition because it is, in fact, a bold expedition. And the reason for that resonates for me is because in order for me to have started off in technology, being an IT consultant, to then moving into e-commerce, to then moving into digital marketing, to then moving into agency leadership, to then moving into leadership development, to then moving into coaching, like each one of those moves were completely different and required bold exploration every single time. And I didn't have a framework. I didn't have a guide. I didn't have any support other than that little voice inside of me guiding me. And so the Bold Expedition is really a program designed to support leaders who are looking to reinvent themselves and do it in a way that's more guided and supported, and to even start to think about, well, how are you going to fund your exploration? Because that's a really big piece about it, right? Like some people are going to be like, I just spoke to somebody this week and she's like, I quit my job. I know I have to make a change and I wasn't going to do it while I was comfortable. I just quit it. I said, great. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up with your funding plan. We're going to figure out what's the funding that you need and how are you going to fund yourself. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out what's the experiments that you need to take in order for you to take action, in order for you to get insights, for you to learn and get the data that you need in order to make the next decision. You might think that what you want to do is this. You might get there and you might learn like that. No, that's not at all what I thought this was going to be. So we learn through engagement, we learn through action, and that's why I call them experiments. So the Bold Expedition is really designed to support leaders who are looking to really reinvent themselves and need the support because it's not easy to do it themselves.
You know, that's a wonderful story and it so resonates. I mean, my first entrepreneurial journey was in manufacturing of natural bath and body care, and we were doing very well. We were written up extensively, and I was in my mid 30s, and I said, I can't do this for the rest of my life. It's just not who I am. It's just not right for me, and that led me to exiting and restarting. And it's such a tough thing to do. It's such, you know, the further you get into your career, the more, you know, you if you have children, if you have university,
Yes.
like it's so challenging. And I'm so glad you have this program because it's life altering. I mean, if you do this the right time with the right intention, boy, the satisfaction is just second to none.
So what helped you? I'm curious, Ken, what helped you to find your next path? What unlocked it for you?
A coach actually helped me because we talked about things that I had lost by becoming a manufacturer. I mean, originally we were one of the first in the market with control brand and private brand or natural bath and body care. And it was very creative and we were doing things differently. But as we got into some of the very large retailers in North America and then into Australasia and some in Europe, I mean, again, it was a great company. But I had lost the creative side of myself. I had lost the thinking or expressionism or you know, which drove the start of the company. And as the industry matured out of what we did. And look, I was very fortunate. I mean, you know, I sold out my shares and I was able to step back and look and I don't know, it just sort of flourished from there. But understanding what's important to you, and I think I did that in that moment. I think that's sort of transcendent. If you have, and again, I was super fortunate that I was in a position that I could take that leap.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're sharing there is giving you the space to reconnect. And so, do you remember any exercises or anything that you worked on with your coach to help you to get back in touch with what you love?
You know, as an entrepreneur, I'm not a wishy, I don't mean this in a negative way. I'm not a wishy-washy person, but like once I made that decision and understood, I took action very quickly to exit it. And from there, got back to writing, got reincorporated things like playing guitar and whatnot, allowing that exploration. And then it opened up a different stream for me. People started, because of that earlier success I had, people were saying, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And it was really rewarding. It was really fun, but I have never since let go the creative side of writing books or writing whatever it is. And now I'm doing my doctorate in human ingenuity in how we think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway, a lot about me, but yes, it really, what you're doing, I think is so incredible with the Bold Expedition and helping people through that path of realization. So So Salima Valji, this has been an unbelievable journey, all in 30 minutes.
Yes, yes.
I thank you so much for coming on Say Hi to the Future and wish you all the best.
Thank you. If I may ask you a question, I'd love to know your name of your podcast, Say Hi to the Future. I'd love to know how you came up with that because I think that's ingenious.
Well, hi is human ingenuity.
Mm.
And
Mm.
really it's, from the first book to the second. The first was on innovation, the process to market. The second one, cause of disturbance, was more about how we develop teams, and it incorporated entrepreneurship. So we went from process to team building, to me realizing that this is all great, but we don't really know how to think.
Mm.
And we were taught very linear thinking, either through math or chemistry, or our primary things, and abductive reasoning, or thinking through uncertainty or ambiguity. It's not our fault, we just weren't taught that.
Yeah.
And it's probably the number one requirement to think forward. So hi human ingenuity, clever inventive thinking, became Say Hi to the Future. And
Oh,
between
interesting.
our events and this podcast and some others, we've touched all 7 continents, including an Antarctic research team.
Amazing. Amazing.
So,
Awesome.
so
Thank you for
Salima,
sharing.
Salima, thank you so much for your time and being a guest.